Caden Riker had spent the last 18 months buried in research, unraveling the mysteries of Velthary genetics. As a xenobiologist stationed on Zelvoria, he had expected many things: complex alien DNA structures, groundbreaking discoveries, perhaps even a few diplomatic encounters. But he had not expected this. The sterile hum of the laboratory filled the silence as he reviewed the latest results on his holoscreen. Strands of Velthary genetic code floated in midair, spiraling like luminous threads of silk. Their cellular structures were unlike anything found on Earth, elegant, efficient, and yet curiously fragile in ways science had yet to explain. Caden leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes. He needed more data. Something wasn't adding up. Then, the door to the lab slid open. At first, he didn't react. The lab saw its fair share of researchers and assistants, though most had the decency to knock. But then the air shifted, a subtle drop in temperature, a presence, unfamiliar yet commanding. Caden looked up, and the breath caught in his throat. She stood framed in the doorway, her figure illuminated by the cold blue light of the lab, tall and poised, with a regal presence that demanded attention. Her skin had the faintest violet hue, like twilight reflecting off still water, smooth and flawless. But what truly captured him were her eyes, piercing gold, glowing faintly in the dim light, their intensity like twin stars burning in a vast expanse. And her hair, long, white as ice, cascading over her shoulders like liquid light. She was, without a doubt, Velthary. Caden slowly straightened, his instincts shifting from casual curiosity to something more measured. He had seen Velthary before, interacted with their scientists and diplomats, but there was something different about her. The way she held herself, not with the distant formality of her kind, but with something closer to urgency. Then she spoke. "Human, I have studied you. I know our species are compatible. If you do not take me as your mate, I will die." The words landed like a thunderclap in the quiet lab. Caden blinked. He was certain he had misheard her. The translator implant was state-of-the-art, but even it had its limitations. Surely, she hadn't just... excuse me? His voice came out more incredulous than he intended. The woman, alien, whatever she was, tilted her head slightly, as if assessing his reaction. She took another step forward, the soft rustle of her flowing garments barely audible over the lab's ambient hum. "I have no time for misunderstandings," she said, her voice smooth, but beneath it, something taut. "I require a mate. Velthary physiology demands it. Without a bond, my body will fail." Caden ran a hand through his dark hair, exhaling sharply. His mind raced through everything he knew about Velthary biology, but nowhere in the research had he encountered anything about death from lack of a mate. "Okay, hold on. Let's back up," he said, his voice measured. "You're telling me that if you don't bond with someone, you'll die?" "Yes." "And you decided that person should be me?" "Yes." Caden let out a breath of disbelief, leaning against the edge of the lab table. "You can't be serious. Do I appear to be joking?" Her golden eyes locked onto his, unwavering. No, she didn't. There was no desperation in her voice, no pleading. She wasn't here to beg. She was here because she had made a decision. And that, more than anything, made the situation all the more surreal. Caden crossed his arms, forcing himself to think like a scientist. "Look, I don't doubt that your biology is different from ours. But you're asking me to accept something with no proof, no explanation. What does bonding even mean for your species? What would it do to me?" A pause, the first sign of hesitation. "The bond is permanent," she admitted. "Emerging of life, forces of instincts. Once formed, it cannot be undone." Permanent. That single word sent a cold thread of unease down his spine. "And what happens if I say no?" For the first time, something flickered in her expression, an emotion he couldn't quite place. Not fear exactly, but close. "Then I will not last another cycle." Her voice remained steady, but there was something beneath it now. "My body is already failing. The deterioration has begun." Caden looked at her again, this time not just as an unexpected visitor, but as a potential patient. Now that she had said it, he noticed the subtle signs. how she stood, the faint tightness in her jaw, the way her hands curled slightly as if suppressing an unseen discomfort. Her kind was biologically superior in many ways, but even the strongest organisms had vulnerabilities. Still, he wasn't ready to just accept this blindly. "You haven't even told me your name," he said, watching her closely. She hesitated, as if the question had caught her off guard. Then finally, "Zyra." "Okay, Zyra." He exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. "You just walked in here and told me that if I don't mate with you, you'll die. Do you understand how insane that sounds from my perspective?" "I understand that your species prefers deliberation," she said, unfazed. "But my kind does not have the luxury of time. My body will not wait for you to reconcile your thoughts." Caden swore under his breath. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't some diplomatic ploy or biological experiment. It was a plea, a command, a death sentence waiting to be carried out. His instincts screamed at him to step back, to call for an official, to tell her this wasn't his problem. But another part of him, the scientist, the man who had come to Zelvoria to understand, couldn't look away. He had 1,000 questions, but one mattered more than the rest. "Why me?" Zyra regarded him for a long moment, then spoke with a quiet certainty. "Because you're the only one who sees beyond what is written in your data." Silence stretched between them. Caden's mind raced, every logical part of him screaming for caution. But logic wasn't what had brought her here. And maybe, just maybe, logic wouldn't be enough to save her. His pulse thrummed in his ears. "Tell me everything." She took a slow breath, straightening her posture as if preparing to deliver a verdict. "The bond is not simply a choice. It is a biological imperative. Velthari do not survive long without it. Our bodies are designed to merge with another, to create balance. Without a mate, deterioration begins. The body weakens, the mind fractures, until eventually," she hesitated just for a fraction of a second before continuing, "we cease to exist." Caden ran a hand down his face, exhaling sharply. This wasn't just desperation. This was biology written into the very core of her species. It was strange, yet not entirely unfamiliar. Even on Earth, some creatures depended on symbiosis, thriving only when connected to another. But this was something far beyond that. And what does this bond actually do? His voice was quieter now, the sharp edge of disbelief beginning to dull under the weight of reality. Zyra's fingers flexed at her sides before she finally moved. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them, until only a breath separated them. Up close, Caden could see the faint glow of her skin, pulsing like the embers of a dying star. Our energy, our life force, intertwines with our mates. It is not merely physical. It is deeper, a merging of instincts, emotions, even thoughts over time. It is irreversible. She let the final word settle between them. Once the bond is formed, there is no undoing it. Caden felt something cold twist in his gut. No undoing it. He had always been careful with his choices. He had planned his career with meticulous precision, accepted this off-world assignment because it was temporary. Everything in his life had been dictated by logic, by control. And now, standing in front of this alien woman who was asking him to take a step he could never undo, he felt something unfamiliar creeping in. Fear. She must have seen it in his expression because her posture shifted slightly, her fingers curling into the fabric of her sleeve. "I would not ask this of you if there were another way." He believed her. Zyra did not strike him as the kind of being who begged. There was pride in the way she held herself, in the way she spoke. Measured, careful, as if every word was chosen with precision. But beneath that, beneath the control, there was something raw, a truth she couldn't hide. She didn't want to die. Caden exhaled, his mind racing through the consequences, the possibilities. "And if I refuse?" Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. "Then I will leave. And within days, I will be gone." Something about the way she said it, so simply, so final, made his stomach tighten. She wasn't exaggerating. She wasn't manipulating him. She was stating a fact. His fingers drummed against the edge of the table. His brain demanded logic, demanded an out, some other way to solve this without making a decision he couldn't take back. But nothing came. There was no out. Zyra shifted slightly, her stance still poised, but there was a new stiffness in her shoulders. A quiet resignation. I will not force you. That is not our way. Caden's chest tightened at that, as if she had already accepted that he might say no, that she might have to walk away. And maybe that was what made the decision for him. He ran a hand through his hair, let out one last slow breath, then met her gaze. What do I have to do? For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Not relief, not gratitude, but something deeper. Something like hope. The bond must be accepted by both. It will begin with touch. Her fingers twitched at her sides. Once initiated, the process will be irreversible. You will feel it. Caden swallowed. And what happens after that? Zyra hesitated, just for a moment, before she said, then, we will no longer be separate. The words sent a shiver down his spine, but he forced himself to hold steady. He had made his choice, and there was no turning back. The moment Caden's skin touched Zyra's, the world around him changed. It wasn't immediate, not a violent jolt or a sudden flash of light. No, it was slower, like sinking into warm water, a gradual pull that enveloped him inch by inch, seeping into his bones before he could fully comprehend what was happening. Heat bloomed from the point of contact, spreading in waves through his arm, curling into his chest, tightening around his ribs like an unseen force was threading itself through his very being. He inhaled sharply, but even his breath felt different, as though the air entering his lungs was no longer entirely his own. Across from him, Zyra's golden eyes widened slightly. For the first time since she had walked into his lab, something flickered beneath her composure. Surprise. You feel it, she murmured. Caden swallowed hard. Yeah. His voice was hoarse, unfamiliar to his own ears. Zyra's fingers, still pressed against his palm, twitched slightly, and the shift sent another surge of sensation through him. But it wasn't just physical, it was awareness. A new presence curling at the edges of his mind, foreign and yet not entirely unwelcome. It wasn't intrusive, not yet, but it was there. Zyra let out a slow breath, her lashes lowering as she focused. Your name is Caden. The sound of his own name, spoken with such certainty, sent a ripple through him. His body recognized it, but something deeper stirred at the way she said it, as if it was a truth that had settled within her the moment the bond formed. Caden exhaled shakily. And yours is Zyra. She tilted her head, studying him like he was an equation she hadn't expected to solve. You did not know that before. It wasn't a question. No, he admitted, but now I do. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. The bond was more than just a connection of biology. It was recognition. Some part of him now knew her, in ways he hadn't before. Zyra's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but whatever thought had formed in her mind was lost when he unconsciously tightened his grip around her fingers. The reaction was immediate. A sharp gasp escaped her lips, her posture stiffening as something unseen passed between them, deeper, stronger than before. A rush of heat that sent a shiver down his spine, and then a feeling that wasn't his own. He felt her. Not just the warmth of her skin or the press of her body against his, but something inside her, like a breath held too long, a quiet tension wrapped in control. Zyra's golden eyes darkened slightly, her fingers curling against his palm as if grounding herself. The bond. It is stabilizing, she whispered. Caden exhaled through his nose, trying to ignore the way his body was reacting to hers. Every part of him was screaming that something irreversible was happening, that he should be afraid, that he should pull away. But instead, he found himself anchored to her, not by force, not by fear, but by something deeper. Zyra's body shifted slightly, her weight pressing subtly against him. He felt the way her muscles tensed, the way her breath hitched, and then, God's help him, the way she reacted to the bond. Her chest rose in a sharp inhale, her fingers tightening around his as a quiet, unbidden sound escaped her throat. Not pain, not discomfort, pleasure. Caden's pulse slammed against his ribs. He clenched his jaw, trying to ignore the rush of heat that coiled low in his stomach. This wasn't just about instinct or attraction. This was something else entirely. Something primal. Zyra must have felt it too, because her breath came faster now, shallower. Her fingers flexed against his before she abruptly moved, shifting her weight forward, pressing against him in a way that made his entire body lock up. His hands, which had been resting at his sides in an attempt at restraint, reacted. One found the curve of her hip, gripping instinctively. The other slid higher, fingers grazing along the delicate line of her waist. Zyra shuddered. Her head tilted back slightly, her lips parting as a quiet moan spilled past them, unrestrained and raw. Caden cursed under his breath, his grip tightening involuntarily. Zyra! She rolled her hips against his. A sharp growl tore from his throat before he could stop it. Zyra gasped, her eyes snapping open, pupils dilated as she felt what that movement had done to him, what it had done to both of them. The bond pulsed, a hot, throbbing thread of sensation that ran between them like a live current, feeding into itself, amplifying every movement, every breath. Caden's vision blurred for a moment, his body fighting to adjust to the sheer intensity of it. He tried to speak, tried to think, but all he could feel was her. The warmth of her, the press of her, the way her body responded to his touch as if it had always belonged there. And then, as quickly as she had moved, she stilled. Her breath was ragged, her body still trembling slightly, but her fingers pressed firmly against his chest, keeping him in place. Her golden eyes flickered with something unreadable, something caught between instinct and hesitation. Caden forced himself to inhale deeply, grounding himself against the onslaught of sensation. His hands remained where they were, holding her, steadying her, but he didn't move. Not yet. Zyra licked her lips, her gaze locked onto his. This is more than I anticipated. Caden let out a breathless, humorless laugh. Yeah, he rasped. Tell me about it. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them crackled with heat, thick with something neither of them had words for. Then, slowly, Zyra's fingers uncurled from his chest. She took a step back. The bond pulled at him, at both of them, like an invisible tether trying to bring them together again. He felt her resist it, saw the effort it took her to put space between them. Caden clenched his fists, forcing himself to breathe. Zyra swallowed, composing herself. This will take adjustment. No kidding. His voice was rougher than he intended, his body still thrumming with lingering heat. Her gaze lingered on him for a moment longer before she turned, putting even more distance between them. The bond has formed, she said, almost to herself. It will not fade. Caden ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. What does that mean for us? Zyra hesitated. Then, finally, she turned to face him again, her expression unreadable. It means, she said quietly, that you are no longer just human. Caden's breath caught. Something deep inside him shifted at her words. And for the first time since stepping foot on Zelvoria, he realized he would never be the same again. Caden's pulse hadn't settled since the bond took hold. His body still felt too hot, his skin hypersensitive, his breath never quite deep enough to chase away the feeling of her. Zyra's presence curled around the edges of his mind like a phantom sensation, an invisible thread linking them together, pulling him toward her even as she stood a few steps away. His instincts told him that this connection should have faded by now, that whatever foreign force had taken root in him would subside. But it didn't. If anything, it was growing. Zyra's back was to him, her posture rigid, her hands clasped at her sides, as if holding herself still required conscious effort. The air between them pulsed with a tension neither of them fully understood. Finally, she broke the silence. The bond is stabilizing. Caden exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. You keep saying that. What does it actually mean? Zyra turned to face him, her golden eyes unreadable. It means we are now connected in ways that are not yet fully realized. His jaw clenched. That's not an answer. Zyra studied him for a long moment, as if debating how much to say. You feel it, don't you? She asked quietly. Caden didn't respond immediately, but he knew what she meant. He could sense her, even without looking. The bond wasn't just a lingering presence. It was an awareness, a shifting undercurrent of emotion and sensation that moved in tandem with his own. Zyra took a slow step toward him, her gaze never wavering. The more time passes, the more the bond will take hold. It is no longer just about survival. Caden inhaled deeply, trying to push down the frustration rising in his chest. Then what is it about? Zyra hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. Connection. The word sent an odd shiver down his spine. He had spent his life carefully controlling his connections, choosing them, limiting them. He had never been the kind of person who let himself get too close to anyone. Now he had no choice. He stepped forward before he could stop himself, closing the space between them. Tell me the truth. How much of this is still you? And how much is us? Zyra's breath hitched just slightly, her fingers curling at her sides. She didn't answer immediately, and that silence spoke louder than any words could. Caden exhaled slowly, his gaze locked onto hers. That's what I thought. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, deliberately, Zyra reached out and placed her hand against his chest. The second her palm met his skin, warmth surged through him. Not just heat, but something deeper, something that felt like it was rewriting him from the inside out. His breath caught. The bond reacted. Zyra's pupils dilated slightly, her fingers pressing more firmly against him, as if testing the sensation. A soft, almost imperceptible tremor ran through her body, and when she exhaled, it was a breathless, unsteady thing. Caden wasn't sure which one of them moved first, but suddenly, they were too close. Zyra's hand slid upward, fingers grazing the side of his throat. The touch sent a shiver down his spine, his body hyper-aware of every point of contact. He felt the warmth of her breath against his skin, the press of her body against his, the way her heartbeat had synced with his own. He should pull away. He should, but he didn't. Instead, his hands found her waist, gripping her as if she might disappear if he let go. The bond pulsed in response, feeding back into itself, amplifying everything between them. Zyra gasped softly at the sensation, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. Her fingers dug into his shoulders, and for the first time, she let herself lean into him. Caden inhaled sharply, his grip tightening. Zyra. Her name came out rough, almost a plea. She tilted her head slightly, and her lips barely brushed against his jaw as she spoke. This is unlike anything I have experienced before. Caden let out a breathless laugh, his forehead pressing against hers. Yeah, he murmured. Tell me about it. She shifted against him, and the motion sent a fresh wave of heat crashing through him. The bond was demanding, urging them closer, feeding on their proximity. Zyra exhaled sharply, her fingers curling into his shirt. This is dangerous. Caden's breath was unsteady as he spoke. Then why aren't you stopping it? She didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. Neither of them wanted to stop. The bond had already claimed them, and there was no turning back. Caden had always prided himself on being in control of his mind, his body, his choices. Every decision he had made in life had been calculated, deliberate, until now. Now, there was something inside him that didn't belong, something that pulled at his thoughts, that wrapped around his senses, that whispered at the edges of his mind. Zyra. The bond between them pulsed like a second heartbeat, a tether woven so deeply into his being that even when he wasn't looking at her, he felt her. And he hated it, hated the way his body responded to her presence, hated the way his emotions no longer felt entirely his own, hated the way he knew, without a doubt, that she was thinking of him too. She stood across the lab, her golden eyes unreadable, her posture still as stone. But beneath the calm exterior, he sensed something fraying at the edges. Caden clenched his jaw. Tell me how to stop this. Zyra blinked slowly, as if the question itself was unexpected. You cannot. His fingers curled into fists. Then tell me how to lessen it. Another pause. Then softly, We do not truly wish for that. Caden let out a sharp breath, running a hand through his hair. Don't tell me what I want. Zyra tilted her head slightly. I don't need to. I can feel you. Her words sent a cold shiver down his spine. Because she was right. She could feel him just as he could feel her. The weight of it was suffocating. He had agreed to this bond to save her life, not realizing that in doing so, he had entangled his own existence with hers, not realizing that he would wake up every morning feeling the rhythm of her breath in his own chest, sensing the pull of her emotions before he even opened his eyes. It was too much. He turned away, pacing the length of the lab, trying to shake the feeling, trying to drown out the phantom echo of her in his mind. But it was useless. No matter how much space he put between them, she was still there. You are overwhelmed. Her voice was soft, but it carried through him like a shockwave. Caden's fist tightened. Of course I'm overwhelmed. He spun to face her. I don't even know where I end and you begin anymore. Zyra's expression didn't change, but he felt something tighten in her, a flicker of something he couldn't name. And then, she did something unexpected. She took a step back. The moment she moved, pain lanced through his chest, sharp, immediate, like a tether being stretched too far. He staggered, grabbing onto the nearest console for balance, as a hollow ache tore through him. Zyra gasped, her own body jolting from the impact of their separation. She pressed a hand to her ribs, as if the same pain was radiating through her as well. Caden's breath came fast and uneven. What the hell was that? Zyra straightened, but there was a new tension in her posture now, something wary and uncertain. The bond resists distance. Caden let out a harsh laugh, more disbelief than amusement. You mean we physically can't be apart? Zyra hesitated. Not yet. His stomach twisted. What the hell does that mean? Her fingers curled at her sides. The bond is still new. It will take time to settle. Until then, we will feel its strain. Caden pressed his fingers to his temples, trying to suppress the frustration curling through him. This isn't just a biological connection, is it? Zyra's silence was answer enough. He exhaled sharply, dragging his gaze back to her. How far does this go, Zyra? A pause. Then, quietly, farther than either of us expected. The words sent a slow, creeping chill through him. She had known more than she let on. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to know that this was never going to be as simple as survival. That this bond was something deeper, something neither of them could undo. He forced himself to take a step toward her, ignoring the way his body screamed at him to close the space faster. If you knew this would happen, why didn't you warn me? Zyra's gaze met his, steady and unflinching. Because there was no other choice. Anger flared hot in his chest, but beneath it was something darker. Something that felt too much like fear. You took my choice from me. His voice was quieter now, but no less sharp. Zyra's lips parted slightly, but no words came. For the first time, he saw something raw in her expression. Not cold calculation, not logic, but something vulnerable. She had taken his choice. And yet, he couldn't bring himself to hate her for it. Because, deep down, he knew she hadn't had one either. The bond had chosen both of them. Zyra inhaled, as if steadying herself. Caden, the way she said his name sent a shiver through him. Not just because of the way it sounded, but because of the way it felt. As if she wasn't just speaking it, but holding it. Holding him. Something inside him wavered. She took another step back, testing the limit of their bond again. The pain returned instantly, sharp and unrelenting, and Caden cursed under his breath. Stop, he ground out. Zyra froze. His chest heaved as he forced himself to meet her gaze. You don't get to run from this. A muscle in her jaw tightened, but she didn't move. Caden swallowed hard. Neither of us do. The words settled between them like a vow. Zyra's fingers twitched slightly at her sides. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, finally she nodded. I know, and that was the most terrifying part of all. Because they both knew, this was only the beginning. Caden was awake long before his eyes opened. The awareness of her had become as natural as breathing. Zyra's presence coiled in his mind like a quiet hum, steady, inescapable. He could sense her even before his consciousness fully returned, like an unseen force pulling him toward her. But something was off. He inhaled deeply, forcing his body to wake, his muscles aching from the weight of everything they had done, everything they had become. The bond had solidified. It was no longer something new, something unstable. It had settled, woven into the very essence of him, an invisible thread tying his existence to hers. And yet, something had changed. The bed beside him was empty. Caden's eyes snapped open. His heart hammered against his ribs as he pushed himself up, scanning the dimly lit room. Zyra stood by the window, her arms wrapped around herself, her silver-white hair cascading down her back in soft waves. She looked impossibly distant, even though the bond told him otherwise. She was struggling. Caden swung his legs over the bed, rubbing his temples before speaking. "You left." Zyra didn't turn. "I needed to think." His stomach twisted. That wasn't what he wanted to hear. Caden exhaled sharply, running a hand through his already messy hair. "About what?" A pause. Then softly, "About what I have become." Something inside him tightened. He pushed himself to his feet, closing some of the space between them. "You're still you." Zyra let out a breath, too quiet, too fragile for someone who had always held herself so steady. "Am I?" Caden frowned, his chest tightening at the uncertainty in her voice. "Zyra, look at me." She hesitated, then finally turned. For the first time, Caden saw something raw in her golden eyes, something vulnerable, frightened. Not of him, not of the bond, but of herself. Caden's breath caught. "Tell me what's going on." Zyra's fingers curled at her sides. "The bond, it was supposed to be a necessity, a means to survive. But it is more than that now." Caden took another step toward her. "I know." She shook her head. "No, Caden, you do not understand." Her voice trembled just slightly, barely enough to notice. But through the bond, he felt it. She was unraveling. He reached for her before he could stop himself, his fingers brushing her arm. Zyra inhaled sharply at the contact, her body going rigid for half a second before she shuddered. Not in pain, but in recognition. The bond flared between them, surging to life like fire meeting air. Caden swallowed hard. "Talk to me." Zyra closed her eyes for a long moment, as if trying to compose herself. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm not supposed to feel like this." Caden's fingers tightened against her skin. "Like what?" Her lashes lifted, and the intensity in her gaze nearly stole his breath. "Like I am falling." The word sent a sharp bolt of something unnameable through him. Caden's pulse pounded in his ears, but he held her gaze, refusing to let her look away. "And is that really so bad?" Zyra swallowed, her throat working as she struggled to find the words. "It is not logical. It is not Velthory. I was not raised to want this." Caden let out a slow breath. "That's not an answer." Zyra's jaw clenched. "It is all I have." Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unspoken. Then, before he could think, before he could stop himself, Caden moved. He closed the distance between them in a single breath, his hands framing her face, his thumbs brushing the sharp lines of her cheekbones. Zyra froze, her breath hitching, but she didn't pull away, didn't stop him. Caden's voice was rough, low, his lips barely an inch from hers. "Tell me to let go." Zyra's eyes flickered, her pulse hammering against his fingertips. "I can't." Caden's breath shuddered against her lips. "Then stop fighting this." Her lips parted as if to argue, but before she could, he kissed her. Zyra gasped, the sound swallowed between them as the bond exploded, surging through them like wildfire. The moment their mouths met, the last of her hesitation shattered. Caden felt it, felt the way her body melted into his, the way her hands gripped his arms, desperate, instinctive, the way her breath hitched as the bond wrapped around them both like a vice, binding them not just in thought, but in feeling. Zyra shook in his arms, overwhelmed, her fingers digging into his skin as if anchoring herself to him. Caden swallowed a groan, his grip tightening against her waist, against the curve of her back. pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. She wanted this, wanted him, not because of the bond, not because of instinct, but because Zyra had chosen this. Caden kissed her harder, deepening the connection, letting her feel everything he couldn't put into words. She responded in kind, pressing into him with a need that matched his own, her hands sliding into his hair, her lips parting to taste him fully. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was right. And for the first time, Zyra stopped fighting. She surrendered. Caden felt the exact moment she let go, the exact moment she allowed herself to fall. And he was right there to catch her. They broke apart only when breath became a necessity, their foreheads pressed together, their bodies still locked in each other's embrace. Zyra's breath came fast, uneven, her fingers still tangled in his hair. Caden smiled against her skin. Still think this isn't Velthory? Zyra let out a soft, breathless laugh, and it was the most human sound he had ever heard from her. For the first time, she didn't have an answer. And for the first time, she didn't need one. Caden had never felt this aware of another person in his entire life. Zyra's presence wasn't just beside him, it was within him. The bond pulsed quietly beneath his skin, a steady, living thing that connected them in ways he still struggled to understand. It wasn't just emotions. It wasn't just instinct. It was her, and he didn't want to fight it anymore. The tension that had coiled between them for days had finally snapped the night before. And now, standing at the edge of whatever came next, he knew one undeniable truth. This was no longer about survival. He had chosen her, and she had chosen him. The problem was, neither of them knew what that truly meant. Zyra was still asleep, her breathing slow and even, her silver-white hair a cascade of silk over the sheets. Caden sat beside her, one arm resting on his bent knee as he watched her. He hadn't slept much, not because of unease, but because some part of him hadn't wanted to miss a single moment of this. She looked different like this, peaceful, unguarded. It was rare to see her without the weight of logic and control pressing down on her shoulders. His chest tightened. He wanted her to have this. He wanted to protect this fragile, fleeting sense of peace. But reality was already closing in. A sharp ping from the lab's main console shattered the quiet, pulling him back to the present. Zyra stirred, her brow furrowing slightly before her golden eyes blinked open, still hazy from sleep. For a brief moment, she simply looked at him, and Caden felt the bond hum between them like a whispered secret. Then, slowly, awareness returned to her features. The moment was over. Zyra sat up, drawing the sheets around her, her posture shifting from relaxed to composed within seconds. The console. Caden exhaled and stood, grabbing a discarded shirt and pulling it on as he moved toward the flashing display. Yeah, I heard it. The screen flickered to life at his touch, and a message that greeted him sent ice through his veins. Priority transmission. Source: Velthory High Command. Caden clenched his jaw. That can't be good. Zyra was at his side in an instant, scanning the screen, her face carefully blank. But through the bond, he could feel the spike of tension rolling off her. Her people had found her. Caden tapped the screen, bringing the message into full view. Velthory Officer Zyra Dvarin, you are hereby ordered to return to the capital at once. Your status remains under review. You are not to engage with any external entities until further notice. Failure to comply will be met with consequences. Zyra's fingers tightened at her sides. Caden read the message again, his gut twisting. Consequences. The word sat heavy in the air, unspoken threats lurking beneath its surface. This isn't just a recall, he said, voice low. They know. Zyra inhaled sharply, but her expression remained unreadable. It is possible they only suspect. Caden turned to face her fully. And if they don't, she didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. The Velthory were not a species that tolerated deviation. Their society was built on control, on order. And Zyra had broken that order. She had bonded with a human. She had made a choice that could not be undone. Caden ran a hand through his hair, trying to suppress the sharp wave of anger rising in his chest. So what's the plan? You just walk back into their hands and hope for the best. Zyra's gaze flickered. I'm still Velthury. Caden took a step toward her. You're also mine. The words came out before he could stop them. Raw and unfiltered, the truth of them sinking deep. Zyra's breath caught, her golden eyes widening slightly. He felt the shift in her through the bond, a sudden, sharp ache like something breaking apart and reshaping itself at the same time. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, slowly, she reached out, her fingers ghosting over his wrist before settling there, firm and steady. I do not wish to leave. The words were soft, but they carried the weight of a vow. Caden turned his hand over, linking his fingers with hers. Then don't. Zyra exhaled, closing her eyes for a moment before shaking her head. It is not so simple. Why not? His grip tightened. You don't owe them anything. Zyra's lips pressed together. That is not true. Caden swallowed the frustration rising in his throat. Then tell me. Zyra hesitated, but then, finally she spoke. I was not simply stationed here. I was placed on Zelvoria as part of a directive. The High Command assigned me to monitor human research efforts, to observe you. The words hit like a blow. Caden pulled back slightly, his heart hammering. You were spying? Zyra flinched. Not in the way you think. My duty was to ensure that human scientific advancements did not threaten Velthury interests. Caden let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Right? So you weren't watching me specifically, just all of us. She said nothing. Caden exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. Damn it, Zyra. I did not lie to you. Her voice was steady, but there was something almost pleading beneath it. But neither did I tell you everything. Caden wanted to be angry. He should be angry. But through the bond, he could feel her fear. Not of him, not of what he might think, but of what was coming. He forced himself to breathe. So what happens now? Zyra looked away. I must go. The words sent a violent ache through him, more than just emotional. It was physical, like something was being torn apart inside him. The bond rebelled against the idea of separation. Caden gritted his teeth. Like hell you do. Zyra turned back to him, her expression unreadable. If I do not, they will come for me. Caden's mind raced, every instinct screaming at him to stop this, to find another way. But there was no easy answer, no simple path forward. The Velthury would not let this go, and neither would he. Caden exhaled, steadying himself. Then I'm going with you. Zyra's eyes widened. Caden, no. He cut her off, stepping closer. You don't get to make this decision alone. You set yourself. The bond is complete. We're in this together. Zyra searched his face, conflict warring in her expression. If you come with me, you may never return. Caden's gaze didn't waver. Then tell me to stay. Zyra opened her mouth, closed it. She couldn't say the words. Caden nodded, his decision made. Then we leave at dawn. Zyra's fingers curled into his shirt, her breath unsteady. You would do this for me? Caden tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. I'd do anything for you. And as he kissed her, sealing his choice, he knew. No matter what came next, there was no turning back. The ship sliced through the void, Zelvoria shrinking behind them as they sped toward an uncertain future. Caden stood at the viewport, arms crossed, watching as the familiar blue-green planet faded into the endless black. His reflection stared back at him, his expression unreadable. He had made his choice. There was no going back. Behind him, Zyra moved silently across the ship's control panel, entering coordinates, adjusting their course. She had barely spoken since they boarded, her usual composed demeanor back in place. But through the bond, he could feel the storm raging beneath her surface. She was afraid, not of him, not of what they had become, but of what awaited them on the other side. Caden turned, leaning against the viewport. You're too quiet. Zyra didn't look up. I'm focused. He tilted his head, studying her. That's not it. Her fingers hesitated over the console, just for a fraction of a second, before she exhaled and straightened. We will arrive within the hour. Caden folded his arms. And then, Zyra's golden eyes met his, steady but unreadable. Then we will see how far the High Command is willing to go. His jaw clenched. If they think they're just going to take you back like none of this ever happened, they will not. The certainty in her voice sent a chill down his spine. Caden stepped closer. Then what are we walking into? Zyra hesitated. Judgment. The words sat heavy between them. He reached out, taking her hand in his. She didn't pull away. Zyra, if this is a trap. It is. His grip tightened. Then why are we going? She swallowed, her gaze flickering to where their hands were joined. Because running would change nothing. Caden studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed. You really are the most stubborn person I've ever met. Zyra's lips twitched just barely. It is a defining trait of my species. Caden huffed a quiet laugh, but the weight of what was coming still pressed down on them. She was right. They could have run, could have disappeared into the vastness of space, found a quiet corner of the galaxy where no one would find them. But that wasn't what this was about anymore. This was about standing their ground, about proving that what they had become, was more than just an accident of survival. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace. Ahead, the Velthury capital loomed, a sprawling silver structure, sleek and efficient, floating in the void like a silent sentinel. Caden exhaled. No turning back now. Zyra squeezed his hand. Would you if you could? He turned to her, his expression softening. Not for anything. The docking sequence engaged, and within moments, the ship settled into the landing bay. The doors hissed open, revealing a welcoming party that looked anything but welcoming. Velthury officials stood in neat formation, their pale, silver robes pristine, their expressions unreadable. But there was no mistaking the tension in the air. At the center of them stood a figure Caden had never seen before but recognized instantly. Velthury High Command. Zyra inhaled slowly, squaring her shoulders. Caden glanced at her. I'm with you. She didn't react outwardly, but he felt the way the bond steadied her. They stepped forward together. The High Commander, a tall Velthury male with piercing white eyes, took a slow step toward them. His gaze flickered to their joined hands, then to Zyra's face. Zyra Advarin, he said, his voice cold. You have broken our laws. Zyra's chin lifted. I have followed my own path. The High Commander's gaze slid to Caden. And you? Caden met his stare without hesitation. Me? He shrugged. I didn't break any laws. You can't expect a human to follow rules we don't even know exist. The faintest flicker of amusement crossed the commander's face, but it was gone in an instant. The bond you have formed is unnatural, he said. Caden smirked. Funny. It feels pretty natural to me. A murmur passed through the gathered officials. Zyra didn't flinch. You speak of what is unnatural, yet here I stand, alive. Because of this bond, the High Commander's expression darkened. That does not mean it is right. Zyra exhaled slowly. Then tell me, Commander, would you have preferred that I died? Silence. Caden watched the way the Velthury shifted, how the weight of her words settled over them. Finally, the High Commander spoke. This is not just about you, Zyra. Your actions set a precedent. If we allow this, we open a door that may never close. Caden's stomach twisted. So what? You'd rather pretend this never happened? Pretend we don't exist? The High Commander's gaze hardened. That is precisely what we must decide. A cold chill ran down Caden's spine. He could feel Zyra's pulse against his own, the quiet hum of their connection whispering beneath his skin. This was it, the moment everything would be decided. Zyra lifted her chin. Then decide. A long silence stretched between them. Then, you'll be exiled. Caden's breath caught. What? The High Commander's gaze was unwavering. You will not return to Velthury space. Your status as one of us is forfeit. From this moment on, you are no longer bound to our laws or protections. Caden expected Zyra to argue, but instead, she exhaled. And then, she smiled. The High Commander frowned. You accept this? Zyra nodded. I do. Caden stared at her. Zyra! She turned to him, and through the bond, he felt it. Relief. This was never my home, she said softly. Not truly. Caden swallowed, realization crashing over him. She hadn't lost something today. She had been freed. The High Commander studied her for a long moment, then inclined his head. Then go, and do not return." Zyra turned without hesitation, walking back toward their ship. Caden followed, glancing once over his shoulder. The Velthury did not stop them. The moment the doors sealed behind them, he exhaled sharply. "So, exiles, huh?" Zyra turned to him, a spark of something new in her golden eyes. "It is not so terrible." He let out a breathless laugh. "No, I guess it's not." A pause. Then he reached for her, pulling her against him, kissing her like it was the first time, like the future had just been rewritten in their favor. Because it had. They had won, not by force, not by surrender, but by choosing each other. And as their ship lifted off, disappearing into the vastness of space, Caden knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The quiet hum of the ship filled the cabin, a steady, rhythmic pulse beneath them, but neither Caden nor Zyra heard it. All that existed was them. It had been days since they left Velthury's space. Days since she had been exiled. Since Caden had walked away from everything he had ever known. And yet, he had never felt freer. Zyra stood before him, bathed in the soft glow of the control panel, her golden eyes locked onto his with a quiet intensity that sent a slow burn curling through his veins. There was something different about her now, something unrestrained. She had always carried herself with precision, with control, but here now, in this moment, there was none of that. Here, she wasn't a soldier. She wasn't an exile. She was simply his, and she had never looked more beautiful. Caden swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. "Zyra!" She silenced him with a single step forward, her body pressing flush against his, her fingers skimming along his jaw before settling at the nape of his neck. "Stop thinking," she whispered. Then she kissed him. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't careful. It was fire. Caden groaned against her mouth, his hands finding her waist, gripping her as if she might disappear. The bond between them pulsed, a living, breathing thing, amplifying every touch, every ragged breath. Zyra sighed into him, tilting her head, deepening the kiss, her fingers threading into his hair, tugging just enough to send a sharp jolt of pleasure down his spine. Caden cursed softly, his control slipping. He needed her, not just the way a man needed a woman, but the way something ancient and boundless called to its other half. The way fire consumed air. The way gravity pulled planets into orbit. Zyra pulled back just enough to look at him, her lips parted, breathless. "Caden," she murmured, her voice unsteady, like she was discovering something she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. His name had never sounded like that before. Caden's chest tightened, his fingers flexing against her hips. "Yeah." Her gaze flickered, her pupils blown wide. "I feel everything." He exhaled, brushing his lips against hers again, softer this time. "Me too." Her hand slipped beneath his shirt, dragging against bare skin, mapping him, memorizing him. Caden let out a slow breath, his own hands moving with equal reverence, tracing the delicate lines of her back, the soft curve of her spine. She trembled beneath his touch, and something deep inside him snapped. With a low growl, he lifted her effortlessly, turning, pressing her back against the nearest surface. Zyra gasped, her legs instinctively wrapping around his waist, her head tilting back as he trailed slow, burning kisses down the line of her throat. Her nails bit into his shoulders, her breath coming in short, uneven gasps. "Caden, gods!" He loved the way she said his name. He kissed her again, deeper this time, pouring every unspoken word, every promise into her lips. They had fought this for so long, held back, resisted. There was no more resistance, no more hesitation, only this. Zyra shifted, flipping their positions, her movements fluid, predatory. Caden barely had time to register the change before she was on top of him, straddling him, her golden eyes dark with something wild and unrestrained. He let out a breathless laugh. "So that's how it is?" Zyra smirked, her fingers trailing down his chest, slow and deliberate. "You seem surprised." Caden exhaled sharply as she leaned in, pressing a lingering kiss to the corner of his mouth before whispering, I told you. I do not wish to hold back anymore. His hands found her hips, his grip firm but reverent. Then don't. And she didn't. She kissed him like she wanted to consume him, like he was something vital, necessary. And he kissed her like she was the only thing that had ever truly mattered. Time lost meaning. The universe shrank to the space between them, to the heat of their bodies, the rhythm of their breaths, the unbreakable bond that held them together. It was more than passion. It was devotion. It was surrender. It was love. And when the storm finally passed, when their bodies lay tangled together in the quiet aftermath, Zyra exhaled a slow, shuddering breath against his chest. Caden ran his fingers lazily through her hair, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You okay?" Zyra let out a soft, breathless laugh. "I do not think okay is the correct word." He chuckled, tilting her chin up to look at him. "No regrets." Her golden eyes softened, and she reached up, tracing his jaw with the lightest touch. "For the first time in my life," she whispered, "I have none." Caden kissed her again, slow and deep, as if sealing her words between them. Because them, was no longer about fate or survival or duty. It was about choice, and they had chosen each other, again and again. For now, for always.